Okay, hello and welcome to our first live forum that we are holding with the candidates for president of U.S. Soccer Federation. We thank all of our members from American Outlaws who were able to tune in for this forum, and we thank you for your flexibility in everything with the weather delays and everything that Cindy and I both had to experience over the last couple of days. My name is Donald Wine, and I'll be the host as we get to know candidate Cindy Parlow and her position on several key issues facing U.S. soccer and the fan experience. Questions have been curated from past submissions by members, but I also may follow up with Cindy on certain subjects or just answers to questions. And they will focus on a number of topics based on issues that face both our organization and the overall fan experience, focusing on fan-generated and fan-driven issues that other forums may be avoiding. So with that, I'd like to introduce our candidate this afternoon, current president Cindy Parlow. In addition to having 175 caps for the U.S. women's national team during her playing career, she also had stints as assistant coach at the University of North Carolina and as head coach of the Portland Thorns. However, for the past 2 years, she has served as president of the U.S. Soccer Federation and is seeking re-election at the annual general meeting next weekend. Before that, she was vice president of the Federation before assuming the president's chair in March 2020. So, Cindy, first off, thank you for joining us this afternoon. We talked before, and I know you were in Dallas for She Believes Cup along with and we had issues getting back. So I really appreciate your flexibility for making this happen. So thank you. And we want to give you an opportunity to open up with a statement.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this opportunity to address everyone and our fans. If COVID taught us anything from the on the field experience is how important the fans are. Having to play our national team games without fans would just completely change the environment and the atmosphere. So as a former player, I always knew how important the fans were. But I think it just showed everyone how important it is, not only to the players, but to the fans themselves, and being able to come in and be around your friends and have the camaraderie and cheering on the team. So it's really great to be able to address this group and answer some of your questions. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
So we'll start with a simple question. You've been president for 2 years, as I mentioned. Tell me why you're the right person to continue in that role.
Yeah, I came into U.S. soccer quite possibly one of the lowest points in U.S. soccer's history. The very offensive legal filing had just been filed. So there was outrage from sponsors threatening to leave, outrage from players, as well as I think every woman was offended by that legal filing. And then on top of it, COVID, right? Literally the day I took over the presidency, our world shut down due to COVID. So having to pour my heart and soul into the Federation and turning things around, despite all the challenges we've faced, I think I've led the organization with integrity and honesty. I don't always tell you what you want to hear, but I'll always tell you the truth. I took on this role and then I'm running for re-election because I love this game. I'm cursed with probably caring too much, but I believe in this game and I believe in the future of this game. I think I'm the best leader for this organization as I've led us through an unprecedented challenges. I think I've demonstrated my competent leadership and my business acumen. And a great deal of work lies ahead. We've done a lot of things. We've righted the ship. We're going in a good direction, but there's still a lot that I want to do. And I think I'm a proven leader who inspires, who challenges and motivates people to work with me and for me.
So you addressed a lot of things that you've done over the last couple of years, just the number of things that we've had to endure, not just as a federation, but just as a society. So it may change the answers to some of these questions, obviously, in light of COVID or just whatever. But if you are to be reelected, what are 2 tangible changes that you think would be your priority that fans could look back after your tenure is done and say, Cindy tried to accomplish these things?
Yeah, so I've really started pushing on DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and making it a part of everything that we do. So a part of our DNA, so to speak. So looking at everything through the DEIB lens. And we are moving in a good direction. We formed a group inside of Soccer House. And then I think everyone probably saw the announcement of Game Changers United, which is a group that will be a little bit more outward facing, to really help me lead the organization in the efforts that we, and in the spaces that we want to on DEIB. So that's one thing. And part of that is growing the game, right? And becoming more diverse. Right now, our game is very much viewed as a rich white kids sport. And I think we see on our national teams and we see around the world, our national teams are much more representative of our country than I would say that our youth game is. And so really focusing efforts in the DIB space on participation, especially at the youth level. Then obviously, I think everyone saw that we resolved the litigation with the women's team. So really proud of doing that and kind of turning the page and having a better working relationship with our teams. And part of that coming up next is ratifying a CBA. Where we can equalize all monies with our men's and our women's team. So the groundwork has been laid. And I think the players see in me someone that they know and they trust. I think Megan Rapinoe said, like, I wanted to wring your neck sometimes. But they know I also told them the truth. Like, I wasn't going to tell them something that wasn't going to be true. But that trust, it has been built and that relationship has been built. And so I think through that, getting a good CBA in place, obviously FIFA World Cup 26 for the men is a huge tentpole event out in the very near future. We're about 4 years away. So I think it's going to take innovative leadership to ensure we meet the moment and use it to exponentially grow our sport in all ways, participation, fandom, and as well as commercially, and making sure that the World Cup has a positive impact on all 50 states. So these are just a few of the things. We have some other things in the works that we're working on as well. Obviously, I would love to build a national training center. We're working with Deloitte right now on the feasibility of that and what that would look like and what it would take. So really excited to begin the groundwork on that as well.
So you mentioned DEIB, and I wanted to stay in that area for just a second. You know, we see the national teams and we see how diverse the players are becoming, but obviously in other areas it hasn't come along as quickly. How do you challenge yourself to fight the people who are saying, hey, we have Black players on the team, that should be enough? How do you tackle that and make it where we're continuing to make those inroads in other areas where the diversity is still lacking?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things we can do. And when people bring up the point of the national team and the diversity of the national team, what immediately comes to mind to me is how much better did they have to be to make it? And many of them were the only one that looks like them on their team. And so how much more challenging was it for them? How much more energy did they have to use just because they were different? And so how do we change that dynamic where everyone feels welcomed and included at the soccer field, regardless of their background? And for me personally, I've done a lot of work in this area. I've done a lot of work in the slums of India and the townships of South Africa, and then working with refugees here in the US. We have a lot of work to do in this space. I think one thing is, which is simple, it's low-hanging fruit, is improve our inclusion training. So all of our coaches, free training on our licenses, just on our website, on how do you be more inclusive and more thoughtful, and making sure that when you do have a kid that isn't from a rich white community, that they feel welcomed and valued and are safe in that environment. So I think that's one thing we can do to increase diversity at the youth level. I think other things is bringing the game to them, because right now we largely require kids to find a program or find a team. And oftentimes in underserved communities, transportation is an issue. So how do we bring it to them? Is it in the school? Is it in the PE curriculum? Is it an after school program so that so they don't have to have that extra burden of travel? I think the other thing we can do from a US soccer perspective is revamp our marketing, right? There's a reason why our sport is viewed the way it is, and we need to start changing that perspective. And by changing that perspective, we need to make inroads into the underserved communities and start telling those stories through content, using influencer networks, and just really thinking about how do we have a positive impact on their lives. For me, I won't rest until every kid that wants to play this game has the opportunity to play, because I know I'm the person I am today. I'm the leader I am today because of what the sport has brought my life. And I know I wouldn't be where I am without this game playing such an influential role in my life. I think about my time on the national team. I joined the national team when I was 17. I was one of the lucky ones that made it up to that level. But I feel so fortunate. Like the medals and the World Cups were all fantastic. Don't get me wrong. But like my takeaway for life is I learned so much about being a leader from Carlo Overbeck, Julie Foudy, Mia Hamm, Christine Lilly, like all these amazing leaders on that team. And I was just a 17-year-old kid absorbing everything. And so I know what the game has given me and can give other kids. I mean, I'm a youth coach, so I experience it every day. Some of the other things, though, getting back to your question to the youth, is creating more recreational opportunities and recreational pathways for kids. I think one thing about our sport that kind of frustrates me is, and this came from talking to US Soccer Foundation President Ed Foster Simeon. We were talking and he said something that really resonated with me. He said, you know, in soccer, you either move up the pyramid or you move out. And I thought about it and I'm like, you're right. And it's not like that in other sports. In basketball, you find the level that you can compete at and you compete at it. Whereas in soccer, for some reason, there's this stigma that if you're not moving up and playing elite level and traveling all over the US to play games, then you might as well go do something else. And we've got to change that perspective and have kids playing our sport that just want to play with their friends and just want to have fun and aren't interested in climbing the ladder.
I really appreciate that answer because it deals with accessibility, and that's really a big issue facing us. So I appreciate your candor there. And it kind of leads into just overall fan accessibility, not just to the game, but also to matches. And it was the bulk of our questions that were submitted by members in the past. So I want to focus on this for a few minutes, mainly starting with venue selection. You know, recently we've seen several matches in just a few locations, which, while great for those states or cities, really makes it where other fans are disappointed because they feel like the game is not ever going to come to them, or that the federation in their mind may avoid their cities for future matches. So what do you say to those fans, and how do you bring the game to more fans and not oversaturate the same 5 to 10 markets in this huge country that we live in?
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges that we face. You know, there's a lot that goes into that decision. And I think this year particularly has seen that happen. We have been in the same locations quite a bit. And so I think this is kind of a one-off year where we're seeing that, because it hasn't really been true in the past. And there were a lot of reasons that has been happening. A large extent, especially with like World Cup qualifying, is the location of the other games and trying to decrease the travel. Because obviously Greg wants his team to travel as little as possible between games. So I think we have seen that a little bit this year. But I think if you look at years past, they are a little bit more spread out. But the game isn't in all 50 states, like you say. And so I think we do need to find ways to, even if the games aren't going to be in a smaller state, so to speak, how can we bring the passion and the joy and the excitement of those games to those states in other ways?
Yeah, and along those lines, obviously recently, as you know, the men's window was a very unique one, it being in January in the middle of winter. But we obviously were in conditions that were viewed as dangerous for both the players and for fans traveling to the game. Now, I know you can't control the weather. I can't control the weather either, but what is U.S. Soccer doing to ensure and make it where people understand that, hey, player safety and especially fan safety are still at the forefront of some of these decisions that are being made?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, no one knew it was going to be like that in Minneapolis. I was at that game, and I can tell you, I've never been in weather so cold. I grew up in the South. I live in the South now, so I am not a cold weather person. So I think that was a really challenging condition. Obviously, we didn't know that it was going to be that cold. We figured it would be cold, maybe snowing, but those conditions were not suitable for play. But I give credit to both teams in the resilience and getting the job done. Hopefully we never encounter anything like that again. Hindsight's always 2020. I think if we knew then what we know now, would we have played in Minneapolis? Probably not.
Mm-hmm. And goes without saying, I think there's obviously other ways, like just for clarity's sake, was playing indoors in Minneapolis considered, given US Bank Stadium was down the street? Was that ever a consideration, or was it where we were just focused on playing that game at Allianz?
I don't know that possibility ever came up in discussions. As you may be aware, that I'm not actually in the discussions on venue location.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if you had any inkling into what went behind that decision, but I appreciate that answer as well. And finally, honestly, I wouldn't be a human being if we didn't acknowledge that there are some terrible things going on in the world right now, from the Ukraine and the invasion going on there, to the governor of Texas passing regulations that endanger both the safety of transgender children and the freedom of their parents to do their job and protect those children. So some have called for U.S. Soccer to stop holding matches in states or playing teams that pass laws that target the civil liberties of minorities and other marginalized groups that can't be protected. So what do you think U.S. Soccer's role should be in addressing those moral objections?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked to the players, and we've also talked with other organizations that are leaders in this area. And boycotting doesn't really accomplish much. It's more in bringing messaging and education to the landscape. So I think you guys saw with Katerina Macario, protect trans kids. So I think there's things like that we can continue to do to continue to advance the conversation and to push the social justice in the right direction. So I mean, all the organizations that are leaders in this space are communicating to us that boycotting really doesn't accomplish anything. Like coming in there, having the conversation, pushing the envelope, as well as like we do other things like get out the vote when we go to different states. So I think there's other ways that we can do it. And this is the information that I'm receiving from the different groups that are leaders in this. So I think, is there more that we can do? I think there's always more that we can do. And I've been really proud of our teams in advancing the conversation, especially our women's national team has been front and center on many of these topics. For me, if the kids aren't safe, then nothing else matters. So we need to do everything in our power to make sure kids are safe. And I think US Soccer was the first sports organization to put in legislation to protect trans kids. So pretty proud of that. That was well before my presidency. I think it was during Sunil's presidency. But we still need to continue to push and do more.
And you mentioned the players and some of the demonstrations or shows of support that they are doing for the causes that they believe in. And I think to your credit, US Soccer has done well to help elevate those platforms throughout the last couple of years. What are you going to do to continue doing that, especially given that, they are targeting, we go back to DEI, and B, they're targeting some of these, marginalized people who are, and saying, hey, look, we represent you. How do you elevate them even further, and also maybe get some of those groups in front of their heroes to make it where they be able to experience the game the way, I'm fortunate enough of experiencing?
Right. No, I think you bring up a good point. And this is a constant conversation that we're having with our players, because let's be honest about it. The players are the best advocates for the game and the best advocates for social justice. Their platforms are quite large. So for us, it's about supporting our players, and how can we elevate their voices, and how can we do more work together. And I think this is one of the great things about the settlement of the litigation, is that there is so much more collaboration, and now building on that trust to say, yeah, we're behind you, we support you, how can we help you? So just continuing to do that and every level that we can.
I want to shift gears a little bit. You mentioned in the couple of things that you mentioned were a priority, the 2026 World Cup. Of course, it's just 4 years away. You know, knock on wood, we will have a World Cup to worry about this year and next year for the men and women. But looking forward to 2026, it's here in North America, it's in our backyard. And their initial concern right now from people is that they may be priced out of said World Cup. So what is US Soccer going to do? And I know US Soccer doesn't have full total control over the World Cup, given it's FIFA's baby, but what will US Soccer do under your leadership to ensure that the average fan, or as many fans as possible, will be able to experience the world's biggest tournament in our backyard?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have much control over the ticket price for the World Cup. We are working with FIFA to try to do a pre-sale for all of our members and all of our fans of our professional leagues. So at least to have early access to tickets. But I do think there are other things that we can do for our citizens to make sure that they have access to the game, even if not a ticket to the stadium, via fan fest, watch parties, and really like celebrating the watch parties. You know, I've been to a few watch parties in the past, and it was almost better than being in the stadium. The passion and the joy, and just the energy in such a tight area, and not as much restriction on movement as you have at the match. So I do think there's a lot of things that we can be creative about to make sure that everyone that wants to be a part of the World Cup has the opportunity to be.
Yeah, and just as a fun fact, 95% of AO members have 5 or fewer games that they've attended live. So I know a lot of people are looking forward to possibly adding to that total, or making it their first to go to a World Cup in their backyard. So I want to shift to the women for a second. There's been talk about whether US Soccer will make a bid for 2027 or 2031. Just for clarification, is US Soccer considering those? I know there's legalities involved with the actual bid process, but are you guys considering both 2027 and or 2031 to bid for the United States?
Yeah, we are. FIFA hasn't opened up the bidding application process yet for 27. So we're looking at both 27 and 31 to see which one makes more sense for US Soccer and for the greater soccer community here in the US. For me, you know, as a former women's national team player, I think it would be fantastic to have the World Cup back here. You know, I think right now we're focused on our men qualifying for 22, our women qualifying for 23 and 24. And then the focus will shift to 26. But in the middle of all that, bidding for 27 and 31 will likely open up. And we're very much planning on bidding for one or both.
Great. And with both the men and the women, as you know, there's going to be some weird windows coming up. The men obviously will have 4 years where there's no World Cup qualifying involved. So there won't be at least domestically, other than the Gold Cup and Nations League competitive matches. The women always have a weird 2-year window where there isn't anything to really, I wouldn't say necessarily compete for, but there isn't any competitive matches on the horizon in the form of World Cup qualifier, World Cup, or the Olympics. So what is your plan to keep the fan base energized during those windows, especially given that in the next 4 years, you'll have it where both of them kind of line up at the same time?
Well, the men have a great opportunity, right, with World Cup 26, that everyone's going to want to come here to the States to play. So I think that's a great opportunity for our fans and to bring in different competition. You know, I feel like much of 2021 and 2022 right now has been against CONCACAF teams. So diversifying our opponents from people all over the world and playing teams all over the world, because you know, we want our men to be the best in CONCACAF for sure, but our goal is to be one of the best in the world and the top 8 in the world. And in order to do that, we need to play the top competition from around the world as well. So I think leading up to 2026 is a great opportunity for our men's team. And then for our women's team, we have the She Believes tournament that it has been a great platform. And it was just friendlies, but we kind of turned it into a tournament. And I think we saw in the recent games how important that was to bring in the young players to have that sense of a tournament in that last game, like a must-win game, and how they grew throughout that tournament to win it. I think was fantastic to watch, and I hope everyone enjoyed watching the younger players that we've brought in that haven't had the experiences with the national team. And so I think we're seeing that infusion of youth, both for our men's team and our women's team right now. And I think it's an exciting time, but we'll continue to make sure that our men's and women's team have the games that they need to continue to develop the team, whether it's an in competition year or out of competition year, and to have those must-win games to continue to develop our talent.
So I want to shift gears back to the women. And as you mentioned on Monday, I think great news for everyone. The litigation had been settled out of court, but obviously there are some, we're not at the finish line, but we see it in our horizon. So real quickly, without getting into the specifics of things, how close are we? I know it's contingent on a collective bargaining agreement being agreed to. How close are we to actually getting that done?
Yeah, we're close. I'll give credit to the players. They have been very engaged. In US Soccer, we're trying to do everything in a very open and transparent way. We've been inviting the Men's Players Association to the Women's Players Association negotiations and vice versa, because we want to move to one contract that is the same compensation wise and equal. They can have differences because the men's team, some things are important to them, and the women's team have things that are important to them, which are fine. We're fine with differences as long as everyone's a part of the conversation and everyone agrees that it's equal. But we're moving towards that. And then obviously the one sticking point that we have to find a solution on is World Cup prize money, and how, until FIFA equalizes World Cup prize money, how do the men's, women's, and US Soccer come together to find a solution to equalize it ourselves?
And on the men's side, I know obviously you've been talking about getting the same kind of collective bargaining agreement inside, minus some minor details from the men and the women. So how close are we on the men's side to getting something done as well?
Yeah, I think we're close. We're both looking at one structure, which this is historic, bringing the men's and women's team under the exact same structure, to have them actually negotiating together, or at least witnessing each other's negotiations, so that there's full transparency there. I think that was really important for everyone. And it just goes to building the relationship and building the trust, that we're not trying to hide anything from the players. We just want to move forward in a good direction with them. And we really want to be teammates and partners with them. We're on the same team. And that's one of the reasons why revenue share is now a part of the new contract. Because as the pie grows, we want to be teammates with the players, and work together to grow the pie, not only for the national teams, but for our entire membership. We talked a lot about the youth game and getting into underserved communities. That's going to take resources, as well as growing the adult game.
So I want to go to the domestic pyramid structure for just a second, because I want to stay on the women's side. As you know, obviously, we've, over the last 8 months or so, we've seen some harrowing tales coming from brave NWSL players who have provided detail to some of the abuse that they've had to endure. Allegations, people in power up and down the food chain who did not give their accounts the attention they deserved. I know you've had to deal with this over the last, possibly year or so, but what is US Soccer going to continue to do to ensure this never happens again, and to ensure the safety of women's soccer players across this country?
Yeah, reading Meg Linehan's report was just gut-wrenching. It was horrible to have to read that, to know that these players went through this. I personally know Mana Shim. I coached her at the Portland Thorns, and just a great person, great human. You see me smiling because she just brings a smile to my face. She's just a great person and a great character. But to read through that and what the other players have gone through was just horrible. And for me, growing up in this game and playing this game and coaching, and now as president, if the players aren't safe, nothing else matters, right? And we have to do everything within our power to make sure that the players are safe, from the youth level to the professional level to the international level. And so this is why I immediately hired Sally Yates to conduct an independent investigation. And we've given Sally full autonomy. She access to any resources that she wants, and have told her to follow the facts wherever they lead. One of the challenges that I think Sally has, and we knew this was going to be a challenge from the beginning, is she doesn't have subpoena power. So people that don't want to talk to her don't have to. So I think that the study or the investigation is taking longer than we had expected. But for me, we have to get this right. And I know people are pushing US Soccer to make changes, and I'm 100% on board to making changes, but I don't want to make changes just to say, hey, look what we did. We made changes. I want to make the right changes. I want to make changes that are impactful, that actually help protect the players. And I've asked Sally Yates, and she is committed to it, that if she finds anything that we need to take immediate action on to change immediately, that she will tell us, even if her investigation isn't complete yet. But that investigation, I am fully committed to making 100% open, and publish the full findings. So US Soccer can make the changes that they need to make, but also everyone in the soccer landscape can work to making changes to make sure we can all ensure that the players are safe.
And to that end, I mean, obviously there's a lot now that we can do to help players going forward, but there's still the players that, were forced out of the game essentially because of, stepping forward to tell their story, or because of the abuse they endured. It took the fun out of it. Players like Kai McCullough, who told their story and, probably will never play soccer again. So what do we do to help those players who have been, in their mind, forced out of the game, or because of this abuse, they no longer feel the passion? How do we continue to help them moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, hats off to them. The bravery that took, and then the heartbreaking nature of not being listened to or not being believed. Like, I can't even imagine what that felt like. Thankfully, I can't imagine it, but I think it's just horrible. But I think it's these players, whether they're still playing or former players, to bring them in and help us make the change. So maybe their playing careers are over or towards the end or what have you, but having them be the game changers, right? That this is changing because of you, and celebrating them and celebrating their bravery, and apologizing to not listening, right? Or not believing, what have you. But we have to do better in this area. And the we is collective we. It's me as a person, it's me as president of US Soccer, it's US Soccer as an organization, but it's everyone involved in sport. Because this isn't just a soccer problem, just like it wasn't a gymnastics or swimming problem before. This is a sports problem, and this is a societal problem. And so to start to resolve this, to try to do everything that we can do to make sure this doesn't happen again, it's going to take all of us, and it's the collective we that it's going to take. And so we all need to be committed and working together to make our sports safe.
I want to stay with the women, but I want to actually get into another segment of it. And, there's been a lot of resources pumped into the women's game. The NWSL has, a couple more teams coming in just under a month. And there's been a couple of leagues in the USL who have, generated a lot of women's teams and a lot of interest in a women's US Open Cup. Is that something that is on the radar for US Soccer? And if so, what's the timeline for something like that?
Absolutely. I mean, isn't it awesome where the women's game is going? I've been saying it for a while now. I think the men's game is going to continue to grow, but the women's game is primed for exponential growth. We're seeing it here in the US, we're seeing it in Europe and other places. But I think it's poised for exponential growth across the world. And I think we're going to start to see that again in World Cup 23 and beyond. But very excited about the money going into the women's game now. And it's not just like, whereas before during my time, it was at US Soccer, the sponsors would come in for the men's team and like, oh yeah, and we have this women's team too. Right. And now that's been flipped on its head. You know, some of our sponsors come in because of the women's team, some of our sponsors come in because of the men's team, some are both. But they all sponsor US Soccer as a whole, which is really exciting to see where this game is going. You know, it's no longer supporting the women's team because it's the right thing to do. It's shifted to support women's sports because it's the commercially business smart thing to do now. There is a lot of money in it from a commercial standpoint, broadcasting standpoint. And I'm really excited about the trajectory of not only our women's professional leagues and the national teams, but soccer across the world. And to get to your point of Open Cup, I do believe that Open Cup in 23 or 24 is very viable. We need to work with our different organizations to figure that out. Scheduling is the biggest logistical problem and actually implementing new programming. But we need to work with our professional league, and then USL is looking to bring on a professional league in 24. And so I think working with our so-called pyramid of our professional leagues as well as our adult amateurs organizations, I think it would be a great time to implement US Women's Open Cup.
I'm just going to tell you, I am here for a US Open Cup for the women in 2023 or 2024. Cannot wait for that. Hopefully that happens. But I do want to shift to youth development real quickly. I know we're running a little short on time, but I want to make sure we get some of these questions in. Sticking with the youth part, just the national teams. COVID obviously forced a lot of them into hiatus for the better part of 2 years. So, and I know some of them are starting to come back. I know we have I believe a women's national team that's playing as we speak. So that's great to see. But what's the plan to kind of make sure that these programs reboot fully and get them back to the point they were, where they can be aggressive in recruiting the next generation of talent?
Yeah, I know the game's going on right now. I don't even have a score update. Do you have a score update?
I will get one for you as you speak.
This is how important you are. You're forcing me to miss a game to do the AO podcast.
It's 3-0 right now. We're killing it.
So. All right, good. All right. I'll catch the second half after this. It's been hard, right? COVID has been very challenging in terms of youth national teams and having camps. All their competitions were canceled or postponed. So it's great to see that our youth national team competitions are finally coming back. We've been doing camps now for a few months, and we'll continue the ramp up on the youth national teams, but there's no denying time was lost. There'll be age groups that or players and entire age groups that will come to our national team who never participated or had the opportunity to participate in a U20 World Championship, right? And that, I think that's the first time that that's ever happened. Back in my day, it was a U21 championship, but I think your point is well taken, that all these competitions were postponed or canceled is going to be a challenge in developing these players. And so how do we put them in a tournament format and teach them kind of that must win? I know they get it with their youth teams, but it's really different when you're at the professional level and even in the international level. That's a huge part of development. And so the one good thing is it's even for everyone. Right? No one was competing in a World Cup. But now that's all back online. So hopefully we can get back at it and continuing to develop our youth national teams and get them to Vlatko and to Greg as quickly as we can.
And I know you know this, and for people out there, the amount of youth organizations in this country is limitless. There's so many that are involved in this. So, and obviously, it's become a priority to kind of make sure that the youth, competitions are both great for development, but also affordable. So what's your philosophy on building those youth systems with these organizations and getting them to the table to foster an environment for affordable youth programs in their organizations?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in that question there, Donald. I think you bring up a good point. There's a lot. There's a lot of different organizations. There's a lot of different leagues, which I think brings confusion to the marketplace. And so for parents, for kids, I think that it's a really confusing landscape on where to go and what's the best. And so I do have a few ideas on what U.S. Soccer can do in conjunction and in partnership with our members. And one of them is to bring them together to kind of agree on so-called principles of competition for the good of the game. There's a lot of money in elite level youth soccer, which leads to a lot of infighting among our youth organizations. And it shifted the focus and energy from what is really important, which is the growth of the game and ensuring the kids can learn and grow in a positive environment. And so I think we need to bring the groups together and kind of find out what these principles of competition are. How do we coexist in a more positive environment together? And then how do we actually, like, we have the elite up here, but like the base of the pyramid or the top of the funnel, whichever shape you like best, but how do we ensure that those kids are getting the focus and the needs that they have? I'm specifically focused on that U10 and under age group, and that just purely at the recreational level, not even the kids that are looking to climb up the ladder. And how do we develop more recreational pathways, and which we talked a little bit about earlier. And I think there's a lot of things that U.S. Soccer can do in this areas, both at the elite level and the recreational level, to bring the fun back into the game. Because what you mentioned at the elite level, I don't think it's advancing the game. I don't think it's healthy for the kids. I don't think it's driving development, and it's driving up the cost. Instead of driving 20 minutes to play a team next door to you, you're driving 3 hours to play a team in another state, just because they're in the same alphabet league as you. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in this area, but it requires collaboration among all our members.
And you mentioned pathways, which I think is important because it kind of leads into other pathways, not just to play, but to coach and to be referees. So what's the role in helping potential coaches and potential referees become better at their craft and encourage more involvement beyond parent coaches, which is where most of them get their start?
Yeah, I think U.S. Soccer can help in this as well, with a so-called like digital resource library, where we can put a lot of coaching education stuff in. We've done a lot of work in coaching licenses, but I think we can do more in just like free coaching education resources that are available to anyone online. And that can be from coaching education to blueprints of how to set up a recreational league. And then obviously including information on all of our disability soccer organizations to bring some awareness there. So that if you do have a kid with a disability, we have many disability organizations that are always looking for more players. So doing that, and then as well as just a search engine. Like if I'm in an underserved community and I don't know where to go to even play soccer, how do I find it? So having US Soccer have a so-called like search engine so that you can just type in where you live and you want to play soccer, and helping you find those places to go to play. So those are just a few things that I think US Soccer can do that's more on the player and parent side. The coach and parent side. On the referee side, I think we're kind of at a crisis moment with the state of refereeing, and it's a recruiting and retention, right? So how do we recruit more referees and how do we keep them in refereeing? And I don't think it's an easy solve. I think one, we have to improve the environment of the referees. And I think there's a lot of different ways to do that. It all require buy-in from our membership. I think it's also in education and support of our referees. So educating them more on the environment that they're going to encounter, and then support of the referees so that they know where to turn to for support. But also, I mean, for me, you know, I'm on the fields almost every weekend in the youth game, and we have to do something about the treatment of the referees, from coaches, from parents, even from players. And that can take on many forms. We could do something like a Respect the Referee campaign. US Soccer can do something about humanizing the referees, right? And telling the referees stories from the youth, from kids that are refereeing to our FIFA referees. So I think there's a lot of things we can do, but what we do know is what is occurring right now isn't working. And we do need to make changes in partnership with our members to create a better path forward and improve the recruiting and retention of our referees.
So we have time for a couple more questions, and I want to go back to governance. And right now, the fans are only represented when we, vote for next week. When you get the votes for U.S. Soccer President, there's going to be roughly 1,800 or so votes, and the millions of fans are represented by just 2 of them. So that doesn't make the fans obviously seem like their concerns are being heard or addressed. So what can U.S. Soccer do to change that and give fans more of a voice when it comes to the governance of the organization?
Yeah, I think there's voting strength, and then there's a voice, right? So I think people get fixated on the voting strength, which I understand. But for me, it's more about the communications and having the voice and letting US Soccer know your concerns. You can also let us know what we're doing great as well, but usually I just hear the concerns. But just opening up the conversation and having more conversations on what do the fans need, what are they looking for from US Soccer, and what is important to the fans in terms of governance. So I think you got to look at, kind of shift your thinking a little bit, because I don't know that the voting percentage is going to change much. But I think not focusing on that and really focusing on just the communication aspect of it, because that's where things really get done, right? Is in having that dialogue, developing the relationship, and seeing how we can work together on different initiatives and what's important to the fans.
All right, so a couple more quick questions. I think these
you
are
said
fun.
that last time.
I know, but I have a couple quick, cool questions. The first one, you scored 75 goals for the national team. What was your favorite one?
Ooh, can I pick 2?
They're
both
2
in the same tournament.
That's fine. Go for it.
Probably one of my most fun goals was in the '99 World Cup against Nigeria. A service came in, Brandy Chastain did a diving header kind of at the far post to send it back across the frame of the goal. And I did a diving header around the top of the 6 to score. Like it was just, 2 diving headers in one play. Like it was just this moment, and it was in the World Cup. So, and by the way, Nigeria scored on us first. So we came from behind, and super exciting. Ended up winning 7-1. But that was just a really fun goal, because you practice corner kicks more than anyone ever wants to practice corner kicks. And to have it come together like that with 2 diving headers was pretty special for us. And then my other goal was in the semifinals of the World Cup to put us up 1-0 against Brazil. And I actually credit Tony DeCicco, our coach at the time, just a fantastic coach and human. So thankfully, in a scouting report, and I was paying attention, thankfully I was paying attention to it, he had said how the goalkeeper has a tendency to bobble the ball in the air. And so Julie Foudy sent a cross in, I saw the keeper coming out, and I just anticipated her bobbling the ball, and which she did, and I headed it in. So put us up 1-0. And then late in the game, Michelle Aker scored on a penalty kick to put us up 2-0 for the win. So I think those two goals are probably 2 of my favorite goals I scored with the national team.
Yeah, and in very important circumstances, being the World Cup. And the last question, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Your favorite match of all time that you played in?
Ooh, I don't know.
I mean, it's easy to say something during a World Cup, but that's why I ask. Some people have different ones for different memories, but which one's your favorite?
I don't think I've ever been asked this question, which was my favorite game. Can I pick one that I didn't even play in?
Sure.
So I think the 96 Olympic final, I had just turned 18 years old. I was playing with people that I still had posters up on my wall at home. They're now my teammates. And the entire tournament, I was just a kid in the candy store, like trying to absorb everything and take pictures of everything. And just like, I was kept a journal every night to try to remember everything. I didn't actually play in the final. Tony tried to sub me in at the very end. But just that moment was my first major tournament. As a kid, I grew up dreaming of playing in the Olympics. I didn't know if I thought I would play basketball and soccer in the Olympics. That's how much I knew as a kid. I didn't know that wasn't possible. But to do it in Athens, Georgia, in front of a home crowd, that was probably my favorite moment in match. It was just incredible. And to stand on the podium with our national anthem playing with my teammates, that was probably one of the best moments of my life.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think we all remember that vividly. So we appreciate that. And we're out of questions right now. So I did want to give you one last time to speak directly to our members. Your closing statement. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. I think the amount of gratitude for our fans is tremendous. Both as a player, a coach, and now as president. What you do for our game can't be overstated, and the support of our teams and our players and our different initiatives it's just been fantastic. And I just really appreciate all that you do. And I know you'll continue to do it. And through this process and talking with Donald, I know we need to have more of a dialogue. And I definitely want to do that and learn more about what we can do to support our fans on a larger level. So definitely excited to continue to work with all of you, and just want to say thank you for all you do already.
Yeah, and we appreciate you taking the time today. Again, thank you for your flexibility throughout this and just being responsive to our questions and our concerns. And I really appreciate this conversation, and we wish you the best next weekend.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And for all of you out there, thanks for tuning in. As we mentioned, we do these forums to give members direct access to these candidates and to bring you your questions and concerns to them. This will be our only candidate forum this year. Unfortunately, we were unable to secure one with the other candidate in this race, but both candidates have provided answers to written questionnaires that will be released to members this weekend. So look out for that. Also, next week, we will conduct a straw poll for members to have their voices heard. So AO members, stay tuned to your emails for your ballot, and we will announce the results toward the end of next week. So if you aren't an AO member, it's a great opportunity to join us as we get ready for another very, very important year for our national teams. We have World Cup qualifying and Olympic qualifying for the women, and obviously the end of World Cup qualifying and hopefully the 2022 World Cup for the men. So head to theamericanoutlaws.com/membership, learn more about us. And for those of you who are already members, we love you and we thank you for being a member. So you're the main reason for our success, and you motivate us to continue to do things like this for you. So on behalf of Cindy and the entire AO family, I'm Donald Wine. Thanks again, and enjoy your weekend, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.